Good evening, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for September 18th, 2022, around 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We have a lot to talk about this evening, including Hurricane Fiona now raking portions of Puerto Rico with their worst storm in years. Who's next? Let's go and jump straight into everything. Taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this evening as the sun begins to set, we notice that we have Hurricane Fiona right now to the west now of Puerto Rico. This is bringing tragic events to the island this afternoon, and only will continue for the next while. If we take a look here at the visible satellite imagery before the sun sets, we noticed that earlier today the storm went under an intensification period and was able to build an inner core before landfall in the extreme southwestern portion of Puerto Rico. We noticed that this evening now this has moved over water once again and is near the Isle de Mona, which is right here. And this will be moving off towards kind of the northwest like this, and could get very close here to the island of Hispaniola and the Dominican Republic over the next couple of hours. If we look at the San Juan radar, we notice that, again, here's our storm this evening. Well-developed inner core structure at this particular time. However, it has degraded a little bit, and that is as a result of the landfall here in the extreme portion of southwestern Puerto Rico. And so here's the structure right now. Again, this is also far from the radar, so we're losing some of that low-level structure. But nonetheless, there is still some of these convective bands rotating around. And again, right now, this is actually sitting pretty far south and west of what was expected. We kind of expected a motion that was like this, and instead we kind of got a motion that was almost due west. And so this will likely continue moving at least due west for a little bit before kind of resuming that north-northwest motion. And this will likely bring it over portions of the far eastern part of the Dominican Republic within the next couple of hours into early tomorrow morning. If you look at the recon plane that is in there right now sampling the storm, we notice again the center of circulation was located right here near Isle de Mona, and again this is moving off towards the northwest like this. So again, land interaction seems inevitable at this point, unless if it makes a significant jog towards the north-northwest like this. That is a possibility, so we'll have to keep a trend or an eye here on the trends based on the recon plane. Now, in terms of the overall forecast for this storm, again, it is still a Category 1 hurricane with sustained winds of 85 miles per hour. This is, again, moving off towards the northwest here at 9 officially, and is likely to cross over Hispaniola this evening and then emerge sometime tomorrow afternoon into late tomorrow night, where it strengthens then into a Category 2 hurricane and eventually intensifies into a high-end Category 3 hurricane before potentially setting its sights on Bermuda, which is located right here, sometime Thursday evening going into Friday morning. We also have tropical storm warnings in effect for portions of the Turks and Caicos, as tropical storm conditions are likely, especially if this storm tries to sneak a little bit further west, and we'll talk about that possibility here in a second. We take a look over at the overall watch warning map. Again, we have a hurricane warning that remains in effect for the entire island of Puerto Rico this evening. Those hurricane warnings will likely be downgraded to tropical storm warnings in the coming hours. We still have tropical storm warnings for portions of the USVI at this point. We have a hurricane warning for the eastern part of the Dominican Republic with a tropical storm warning for the northern part. And then we also have tropical storm warnings now in effect for portions of the Turks and Caicos at this point. Now, again, the main threat right now, we are seeing an extreme risk. That's right, an extreme risk for portions of Puerto Rico, especially really about central and western Puerto Rico. And for that matter, the entire island is at a high risk already. But there's an extreme risk of impacts here from about central Puerto Rico westward as this rainfall threat is likely to continue. We noticed that again on the San Juan radar. All of these training bands in here are going to be setting up over portions of the central and western part of Puerto Rico, and this is only going to add to the over 16 inches of rain that has fallen in places today. And we notice that the overall wind forecast here is expected again to be diminished for Puerto Rico now, sustained winds of 50 miles per hour and lessening with time. Again, some of those sustained 60-mile-per-hour winds still on the far western side of Puerto Rico. Isle de Mona here taking a direct landfall hit this evening, more than likely. And then for portions of eastern Hispaniola, that wind threat has actually increased now It's about 80 miles per hour as a result of the core being a little bit further south and west than what was previously forecasted at this point, and it is possible that you take a direct core hit where those winds might be a little bit higher. Now, the rainfall forecast is the biggest problem here. Again, upwards of 20 plus inches of rain is expected across portions of central and western Puerto Rico, with 15 inches across portions of eastern Puerto Rico, and an additional amount of at least 1 to 3 inches across portions of the USVI at this point. And again, even for the eastern part of Hispaniola, while that area could be taking a direct core hit, it will likely be on the western side of the circulation, so it's a little bit more dry on that side. But still, about 5 to 7 inches of rain, especially on the eastern tip there, is probable, with potential for about 4 to 5 inches across portions of the northern islands or the northern part of the island chain at this point. Now, how strong could this system get, at least in the short to medium range? Let's go ahead and look at the H-Wharf here. This is the 12Z run. Valid for 8 p.m. this evening. We notice that, again, right now, it has the storm pretty far south towards the Isle of Damona, but it is still a little bit further towards the east of what we're seeing the actual center position at this point, but not too far right now. We notice that, again, the storm is still dealing with a little bit of southwesterly vertical shear at this particular point, and that's not going to actually be lessening much over the next couple of days. We're still likely to deal with some light to moderate shear across the entire storm environment for several days, but likely the combination here of moisture and the deep, rich fuel of the Caribbean and the southwestern Atlantic in terms of the sea surface temperature profile should allow for intensification to continue. Now, again, where exactly this impacts Dominican Republic, whether or not this stays over water or actually moves inland, will determine the exact intensity, because, of course, if it moves inland, it will weaken a little bit here. But nonetheless, this is expected to get quite close then to the Turks and Caicos, and again, is expected to explosively intensify as this moves off towards the north and eventually towards the north and east, getting very close there to portions of Bermuda at this particular point. If we actually look at the overall wind field here on the H-Wharf, there is the very real potential, if we actually zoom in here, that we could be talking about hurricane impacts directly to the island of Bermuda. This is the island of Bermuda right here. And we notice that there's a core of about 80 to 90 knot winds, especially on the western side of Bermuda, that is likely to impact here according to the H-Wharf. And that does suggest the potential for hurricane impacts directly to the island within just about 4 to 5 days. So this is an increasing threat for the island of Bermuda at this particular point. And so interest there should be continuing to monitor the progress of this system. Now, also for the Turks and Caicos at this point, the HMON forecast shows a possibility where the center is still pretty far north, but the expanding wind field does bring tropical storm conditions, especially on the northern side here of the island. So this will be something to kind of keep in mind as we progress over the next couple of days. Now, in terms of the storm's long track future, there is still a little bit of uncertainty and clarity that needs to be resolved. We'll look at the ECMWF, the European 18Z run here, and we'll kind of just look at what we're dealing with, at least in the short term. We notice that, again, right now, the storm is rounding a ridge that has been weakening and shoving eastward with time. This ridge here has kind of backed off towards the east, and so the storm is rounding that ridge. But at the same time here, this is actually valid within the next 42 hours. We're going to have a shortwave trough that is located over New England at this point. This is actually further weakening the trough and will be tugging our storm further north. And we also have this big trough right here, we notice, that will be digging in across portions of Canada and the U.S. East Coast. This is the main trough that is responsible for picking Fiona up at this point. But again, this still gets awfully close to Bermuda, and then whatever interaction that Fiona and this upper level low here has could determine impacts to portions of Newfoundland and Atlantic Canada, or potentially even portions of the far northeastern United States at this point, and that has not been taken off the table. If we look at the overall spread here on the forecast tracks from the super blend here, this takes in about 139 different ensembles here, including the deterministic members. So we notice there's a pretty high confidence in the track within the next about 24 hours, 24 to 50 hours or so, with the usual blend of uncertainty. However, again, we notice that, again, the stronger tracks here tend to be a little bit further towards the northeast, and also these would be a little bit quicker. And there's still some of these members that are further west and weaker towards the northeastern tip of Cuba. And that's probably pretty unlikely at this point. Obviously, there's a non-zero chance of that happening, but practically this is not going to happen. However, things start to get interesting within about 4 days or so. This is 96 hours from now. We notice that most of the members today have consolidated and been in general agreement. If we go back several model runs previously, we know how it was more left. We had more members towards the west, and today that is kind of corrected once again to be further east. However, in the long range, again, while a lot of the members take this very near to Bermuda, potentially impacting the island directly, there are still several members here that are further south and west at this particular point, and also very slow with that turn out to sea. And these members have still kind of, they've been coming into a little bit of agreement, but they're still in the overall same location. And then within about 6 days, we're talking about the potential still for some of these members to be kind of just drawing out over here. So there's a non-zero potential that we could be dealing with a slower turn, but overall these members are certainly the outliers at this point. The bottom line is that impacts to portions of Bermuda are fairly likely at this particular point. Again, the ensemble means here definitely shown that we have a fairly good clustering and a very good idea that this will be near Bermuda within about 5 days or so, and could again bring direct impacts to the island. So there's a lot to watch here, but again, hurricane conditions are likely to continue for portions of east or western Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic tonight. And I think once we start to get into tomorrow and tomorrow afternoon, we're going to know a lot more about the future track of Fiona and who's next with terms of impacts. So again, right now, the bottom line is we're going to be watching for significant impacts continuing across portions of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola this evening. And that will be translating into the southwestern Atlantic basin sometime by tomorrow afternoon and evening. All right. So that being said, I do hope you have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Mike O'Malley. I'll be talking to you guys again some more tomorrow.